So this photograph I printed from the Pixlr app, and I've blurred out all the details, but I do see there's areas of light and there's areas of dark. So on this other piece of paper here, I'm going to block out what I think is the overall shape, and then from chin to this hair is pretty tall compared to the width of the overall head here. Then neck, I assume the shoulder is right about there. The white of this shoulder is blending in with that background, but I'm pretty sure it does something a little bit like this. And now it's up to me to start thinking about value differences. There's definite dark areas in the hair, around these eyes, under the chin, a little bit around the mouth and nose, and definitely around this collar and neck. So what I'm going to start doing is, with a very light touch, I'm holding the pencil from the eraser area, so I don't really press in. I'm not down pushing really hard, scrubbing this down into the paper's fibers, but I'm just sort of lightly brushing on almost an area of darkness where I see darkness over here in the photograph, and trying to match these areas of gray to this white piece of paper. And by doing this, I'm creating points of interest, or heavy visual spaces. Another word for that is emphasis. I'm emphasizing these dark areas. And the reason that these dark areas are more emphasized is because I'm comparing a dark shape with a white background. If I had a very dark paper and I put white color over it, that would be also emphasized. But if all my shapes are left white and light in value, then there's not that much emphasis on anything. And it's kind of hard to see the portrait because there are definite dark areas here. So around the eyes, I'm going to shade that a little bit, looking for all the dark spaces. There's some under the nose, the mouth. There's this kind of area right here, kind of going down around the chin, a little bit shaded here, and it's all very light, and I'm not pushing hard very much at all because I don't want any of these lines to be permanently embedded into the paper. And I'll just kind of generically sort of shade these shoulders a little bit, just to give some difference between the background, which is actually gray here, but I'm going to leave my background white because I think it looks a little bit more emphasized, where this gray is kind of blending in with the grays of my face and making it a little bit harder to see. I'm going to change my background and just leave it pure white like that. And I am going gray, so my hair is multi-valued. I've got some light areas and some dark areas for shadows and highlights. So I'm looking for anything that looks a little darker than white and putting some shade in there. And if there's issues with my proportions or measurements, I should also think about maybe fixing that too. So there's nose here, just kind of shading. There's a lot of gray here, and there's a little bit of white here. I'm just kind of looking for the darkest darks here, though. Don't worry about so much the medium gray tones. Really look for those darkest areas. And there's some darker areas here. So the nose is lighter than the cheeks because the nose is sticking out into the light, and anything that's receding or going back into space, especially under these eyebrows, will be darker. And again, if there's issues, don't be afraid to change any of it, because this is just the beginning of our picture. There's no details at all. The only information that I'm adding or attempting to add is the shade and some of the overall dimensions of these shapes. So for example, I think this is a little bit, maybe a little bit too round, but at least it's a pretty good start. I think there's some more shading here I'm going to do. And then our next activity would be to maybe think about blending this in a bit. We can use our fingers to smooth out this graphite from the pencil. And because we weren't pushing very hard, it should be pretty smooth and not so much lines coming through. And all pretty erasable too. So we're almost painting in a medium tone over the whole thing. But don't add any to the background. I think for now we're going to keep the background pretty light, and that will make this portrait stand out because it's much different from the white background. If we make the background gray and the portrait's gray and the clothes are gray, then everything's going to blend in a little bit too much. And like I said, this is pretty easy to erase now because I didn't push hard. I can get rid of some of these extra scribbles, and it was pretty scribbly when I did it. I wasn't focused too much on exact outlines at all, but rather a very gestural sort of painterly way of drawing, if that makes any sense at all. Even though it's not paint, I'm using this pencil more kind of like a brush versus something that you would write numbers or letters with. Keep it very loose. And this also gives you a little bit larger shapes to draw with because you're telescoping this length here from your fingers, so you give you a bigger reach. So good luck with this activity, and I'll see you next time.